While playing games from the Grand Theft Auto series, we can meet many charismatic characters. Some of them are really unique, so much so that we can't imagine playing without them. Furthermore, we also find characters that have a significant impact on the main character, but we do not even have the opportunity to meet them in person during the game. A perfect example of such a character is Brian Johnson, the younger brother of CJ, who died 5 years before the events of GTA San Andreas. Yet another type of people are characters who only appear in dialogues and help us to some extent, but again, we can't see how they look like or even sound like. A good example would be the mysterious LB, the existence of which we learn from Ryder. But we will talk about Ryder's friend in a different episode because today we will focus fully on CJ's younger brother, Brian. Welcome to the Gaming Investigators channel. Hubert and Martin here, and we invite you to another video. Let's go! Starting with the basics, it is worth mentioning that Brian was the youngest of all siblings, which as we know was quite substantial. In fact, we never knew too much about this young man and the whole story related to him in general. However, during all the years that have passed since the game's release, people can still find some interesting facts. And so, we know how old Brian was when he died, thanks to a game magazine called Electronic Gaming. The magazine reports that Brian died at the age of 10. As you can see, he was still a teenager who still had his whole life ahead of him. Why do we even think the magazine may indicate the correct age for Brian? Well, among others, because the volume containing this information was released in November 2004, so, in fact, right after the release date. Of course, we know that this does not mean anything, but we are determined by the fact that a similar situation took place in the case of one of the IGN articles. As it turned out, the article published about half a year after GTA 3 correctly indicated the age of the 8-ball from this installment. Funny enough, the accuracy of this information was confirmed by a design document about GTA 3 development, which was published in October 2021 on the GTA Series Videos channel. This shows that some magazines can be quite trustworthy when it comes to information that cannot even be found within the game itself. Returning strictly to the topic, it is worth bearing in mind that these types of magazines or guides, such as the Brady Games ones, often contain not only beta content, but also such flavors as the age of the characters or other interesting data about them. In our opinion, these two arguments give a chance that in 1987, the youngest of the Johnson siblings was in fact 10 years old. Of course, when we talk about Brian's age, we refer to 1987 because it was then that the mysterious event that led to his death took place. Brian's death was the reason for CJ's departure from Los Santos to Liberty City, where the main character of GTA San Andreas spent 5 years of his life. Surprisingly, we noticed an interesting ambiguity in this aspect of the game. We will show you where exactly the question marks appeared in our heads, and we'll discuss our point of view. At the same time, we will also ask you to write your opinion in the comments because often your statements have allowed us to look at a given topic in a completely different way and come to other interesting conclusions. At the beginning, we would like to draw your attention to the mission Los Desperados. Note that after Sweet's statement about CJ being away for 5 years, we can conclude that the decision to leave the city in 1987 was made purely by Carl.
We almost got the hood under control, man. CJ, this is some serious shit, man.
Hey, man, I know, man. I went through a lot of shit for this family since you've been gone, so I know.
What? For yourself, not for the family. Don't get shit confused, nigga.
Man, when you gonna give me a break?
When you stop acting like you the man. You keep yapping on what you done did, let me tell you what I done did. When Kendall needed shoes, I went out and got the money. When Mom's needed an operation, I robbed people for the bread. While you off in Liberty City thinking about your own shit. For 5 years, come on, man. Now you do something you wanna fucking pray? Nigga, please.
Sweet has great grudges against the main character of the game that he has left his family in order to escape and forget about painful experiences from the past. On the other hand, Tenpenny's statement at the very end of the Green Saber mission suggests that CJ was in a way forced to leave Los Santos through exile.
Can't believe that nigga Smoke turned on me.
Smoke? Smoke does exactly what he's told. He learned that lesson a long time ago.
Damn, man, take it
Yeah,
easy.
homies for life? Street loyalty? That's all bullshit, Carl. Didn't you learn that when they ran you out of town just because you let Brian die? Huh? Eddie, I can't deal with this guy. He's an idiot.
But if the pressure of the environment was not so great, and CJ's relatives would not blame him for the death of his brother, perhaps CJ would not have decided to leave town so quickly. As you can see, we have a confrontation of two completely different views. However, it's hard to believe that if it were actually relatives who pushed CJ away, then Sweet would really bear such a big grudge. But knowing Tenpenny's manipulations, knowing that he likes to change reality and looks for ways to piss CJ off, we believe it was CJ himself who made the decision to leave rather than was banished from the city by Grove Street families. Moving on to the very death of Brian. We have said before that he died in a mysterious event. We don't know the circumstances which led to it. Of course, apart from the fact that CJ, as many moments from the game indicate, contributed a lot to this unfortunate situation. Even the famous monologue we hear right after CJ enters Grove Street speaks for itself.
Grove Street. Home. At least it was before I fucked everything up.
However, given that the magazine mentions a tragic accident, several possible scenarios can be drawn from it. The first scenario assumes that the cause of death could have been, for example, a car accident, fire, or even a fall from a great height. On the other hand, the second scenario assumes a situation in which Brian's death took place as a result of a beating or murder with the use of a firearm. For example, Brian may have been fatally shot or heavily beaten by members of a hostile gang. This is a highly probable option due to where Brian lives and what company he grew up with. What's more, there are assumptions that in this case, Brian was not meant to be killed at all, and that it was just a coincidence. We believe that if the Ballas, who are the nemesis of the GSF, took part in this action, they could have planned the entire thing to get rid of CJ, who was an important gang member, as a result of which his murder could greatly weaken the families. Moreover, there is even a possibility that Big Smoke may have contributed indirectly to this. One of the lines that can be heard in the mission, The Green Saber, speaks in favor of this statement. Looking at the tone of this line of dialogue, it would seem that Big Smoke has already done assignments for Tenpenny, so it could be that the Ballas trap set for CJ might have been one such task. As a consequence of such events, the theory that Brian died indirectly at the hands of Big Smoke cannot be ruled out. For example, Smoke convinced CJ to show up in a given place, but he did not necessarily know that CJ would take Brian with him. Of course, we emphasize once again that there is no certainty here that Big Smoke was involved in this incident, but there is a high probability in this case. Anyway, what we know for sure is that CJ could have prevented his little brother from dying. The best evidence is Sweet, who is almost boiling when the subject of that event is brought up. It is clearly visible in one of the shots from the introduction movie.
What up, Brian been dead, what, 5 years now?
Yeah, CJ had 5 years when he should have been dead. Man, I lost 2 brothers, man. One got killed and one showed himself. Oh, perpetrating ass.
You real gangster, man, but you gotta lighten up. See, CJ,
CJ running around like a fool on the East Coast. He can rot in hell for all I give a fuck.
Also, in the plot of the game, we witness situations in which we see CJ repeatedly blamed for the death of his brother. It can therefore be assumed with a fairly high degree of probability that in each of the variants of the circumstances of Brian's death, Carl either fled the scene fearing for his own life, or simply did not give his younger brother effective help. Who knows if it wasn't this event that made Ryder think of Carl as a buster, which Ryder calls him pretty much every time. Either way, news of Brian's death spread quickly through the city. Many people were completely shocked because what was the reason to murder an innocent small child? CJ himself probably had such thoughts that it would be better if he died than Brian. After all, his guilt was so great that the man did not even show up at the funeral, trying to leave the past behind by moving to Liberty City.
That's another funeral you ran away from, fool. Just like Brian's.
Hey, she was my mama too.
Not for the past 5 years she wasn't, nigga.
And now, let's move on to specific missions in the game's storyline to see what we can deduce from them. The first task is the mission Big Smoke. During this quest, CJ returns to his mother's house and immediately experiences a flashback of the events of the past. Memories burst into CJ's head, giving us players the opportunity to even hear Brian's voice. From what Brian said, we can guess that his relationship with CJ was very good. Despite the age gap, CJ enjoyed playing with Brian and hanging out with him in general.
Quit it! Moms are here.
In addition, Kendall's statement clearly suggests that the boys wanted to try new things all the time.
Stop it! What are you doing, Carl? Brian, stop it!
It is worth mentioning that, initially in this mission, we were also supposed to hear the voice of the boy's mother. Beverly Johnson asked them to stop arguing and go wash their hands. The next mission we will focus on is 9s and AKs. Years later, we meet Emmett, who was a close friend of the Johnson family and the Grove Street families in general. As it turns out, after years of absence, Emmett is unable to recognize CJ, as he confuses him with his younger brother Brian.
Aren't you Beverly Johnson's boy?
That's right.
Brian, say, ain't you dead?
No, Emmett. The other one, Carl.
I'm sorry about Beverly.
This indicates that, despite the age difference, the Johnson brothers were very much alike. As for Brian's appearance, a long time ago when the game files hadn't been thoroughly explored, some people thought that one of the photos that hangs in the living room of one of the Johnson house shows Brian with Kendall. Later, when it was discovered that Sweet in the beta stage looked exactly like the man in the photo, it became clear that Brian's looks would probably remain an unsolved mystery forever. And now, let's move on to interesting missions from the player's point of view, in which we see a kind of fight taking place in CJ's head. Of course, related to the great difficulty of accepting the awareness that Brian died because of CJ's fault. Brian is mentioned in the missions Robbing Uncle Sam and the Green Saber. These are two moments where CJ, despite those 5 years, still can't accept what happened in the past. In addition, Tenpenny also knows about everything and intentionally reminds CJ of this in order to bring him down and weaken him even more. Well, we talked about that before. Moving on, in the Beat Down on Beat Up mission, it turns out that the deleted conversation between CJ and Big Bear shows that Bear is also very familiar with the situation. There are some really interesting points in the dialogue, such as the fact that Sweet has changed seriously after Brian's death and has done nothing to prevent the collapse of GSF.
Anyways, man, Sweet, he just became a hard man to be with, you know? Then we got bad blood with Seville Boulevard families, and they split from the Grove, then Temple. Hell, they went Lone Ranger too. Sweet, man, he did absolutely nothing.
The last time we hear Brian's name is in the mission End of the Line. In this task, CJ finally accepts that Brian died because of him before going to confront Big Smoke. CJ wants to redeem himself by getting Big Smoke alone. Certainly, the loss of Brian influenced CJ's thinking at the time. He did not want Sweet to enter the Crack Fortress with him in order to minimize the chance of losing another brother, learning from the mistakes. Summarizing the whole of today's episode, we regret that Rockstar did not attempt to explain many question marks, whether it was in the introduction movie or in GTA San Andreas stories, which unfortunately was never made. However, this does not change the fact that the field for speculating on Brian's thread is enormous. If you have any interesting opinions, or if you manage to notice something more, be sure to let us know in the comment section. In the meantime, thank you for your presence, and we encourage you to check out the 2 videos we have suggested that are currently displayed on the screen. Take care, and see you soon.